Welcome to the which is the end of the first half. So we're now at the end of term one, as we call it, effectively at the halfway mark once we have completed this subject or this unit, which is called Ensure Team Effectiveness. So this is the first webinar in the set. We always have 4 webinars in each set, the 4th webinar dedicated to your assessment tasks. This is what we call our resource support workshop number 1. So this is the first of 3 workshops where we talk through some of the content, some of the information, we go through some of the topics that you'll need to know in order to successfully submit and complete your assessment tasks for this particular unit. So this unit here, Ensure Team Effectiveness. What I might do is just give you a bit of a high level view of what's happening in this particular unit, this particular subject. Actually, this is copied straight off training.gov, and this unit describes the performance outcomes, skills, knowledge, and required to facilitate all aspects of teamwork within the organisation. It involves taking a leadership role in the development of team plans, leading and facilitating teamwork, and actively engaging with the management of the organisation. So this unit that we're about to go through, it applies to managers and addresses the need for managers to facilitate work teams and to build positive culture within work teams. And then it continues on a little bit further than that. It doesn't wholly and solely apply to managers. In fact, quite the opposite, as we discuss throughout this course. Actually, leadership are the main sort of themes that we talk about throughout this course, and it actually relates more to leaders, which, as we know, it's leadership being something which is available to anybody and everybody. Okay, so let's have a look at the subject. So this is the subject itself. This is what it looks like when you click on it. Like all good subjects, you've got your lessons and your learning materials there, and you've got your learning activities. There are 4 learning activities here, and there are only two assessment tasks you'll need to complete this particular unit. And I'll give you a bit of an idea of what you'll be looking at in your assessment tasks as well. The first assessment task is actually a case study. It's about a local grocery business where there's a consultant that comes in. It's a bit like I guess you could say a Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmare, if you ever watched that show before, where you've got a consultant that comes into a business and identifies potential issues that might be existing in that business. And it's a cute little video you've got. It's a 1-hour video for you guys to watch. And there's a series of questions that you need to answer based on that, talking about how they can communicate and work more effectively as a team and things like that. A really good little assessment task, that first one. And the second one, it's also a case study. We give you a situation where there's effectively a bit of conflict in a team, and you are going to act as the manager, the team leader, and offer advice on how to gain teamwork and resolve a bit of that conflict. Yeah, so there's a couple of real practical assessments coming up in this particular subject. So it's a good little unit, this one. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's have a look at, so to go back, by the end of this session, this is the resource support session number 1. So by the end of this session, you'll actually have all of the information that you need to successfully complete the first learning activity, which is establish team performance plan. I've just highlighted that on the screen there. That is the one. If we open that, there's a set of questions for you guys to answer, of course. Here we go. We've got 5 questions to answer. Each of these learning activities do sort of touch on the previous one a little bit, and so there's going to be a bit of crossover. There might be times where we're discussing similar concepts and similar threads actually right throughout the course. You might hear some things that are sort of, I guess, doubled up, or we've talked about it to a certain degree or to some point. And that's okay too, because at the end of the day, all elements should be interacting and working together, like cogs of a machine, like all parts of a car that all work together and operate as one. So, when we're talking about teamwork, we talk about providing feedback and conflict and performance planner, they do cross over to other subjects, but it is all related. So it's almost impossible to talk about one subject by itself without effectively going into other subjects at the same time. And so this is, I guess, what we'll do is we'll give you all the information that you need to successfully complete this first learning activity. And obviously by the end of the third resource support workshop, you'll have all of the information to then go off and complete those couple of assessments that are on that front page as well. Now I've got the lovely Sue joining me today. Thank you so much for joining, Sue. How are you doing?
Good, thank you very much. I'm excited to be doing this one.
Okay,
Looking forward to it.
I'm happy that you're with us today. Thank you very much for joining. So, like what we quite often do, and it's actually fitting because if you have a look at the very first question here, it says in your own words, define the meaning of team. Now, I think it's always a good starting point anyway to clear up some definitions or to give a bit of a definition. So, I'm going to read the definition that I have found. I'll do a bit of reading. This is actually straight off your learning materials, guys. So, when you go back to the course page itself, if you actually open up the learning materials, this information that I'm going through right now can be found there. So to go into the actual learning materials and check out the info there. But nevertheless, what is the team? That is the first question. The word team conveys different things to different people. Some people think of a sporting situation where personal personal bests and winning no matter what are important. Others consider teamwork values such as sharing or cooperating and helping one another as essential to a team effort. Teams can be formed by as few as two people. In fact, marriage is often referred to as a partnership or a team. And here's another one, another definition here. Team definition: a small number of people with complementary skills. It's an interesting one, complementary skills, who are committed to a common purpose, performance goals, and approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. I'm going to read that again because I just like to hear that again. A small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, performance goals, and approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. The key words are mutual and accountable. The last two words, actually, for me, the definition of a team can be broken down into two words only, and those two words are mutual accountability. And what we mean by that is that we as a team, Sue, if you and I are a team, it means that we are both
Yep.
responsible for each other. So if you and I are working as a team, if we're a partnership, we're a team, to be defined as a team, we have to be able to hold each other accountable for each other's actions. So if I'm off doing something which is completely out of the ordinary or it's completely out of what we're trying to achieve, what our goals are, what we're trying to actually, what our common purpose is, then you, as a member of this team, have to have mutual accountability and responsibility. You will have to actually pick up some of my slack or actually pull me back into line. And that is kind of what is key
Mm.
in trying to understand the definition of a team. Um, those sort of things don't happen in groups. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a discussion about groups versus teams because we quite often refer to groups of people as a team, but the reality is without mutual accountability, so without being responsible for other members, it actually technically isn't a team by the absolute definition of it. Now, how big can a team be? That's actually a really interesting question. Teams can actually range in size from two people to more than 25 people. However, the majority of effective teams have an average of around 10 people. There is a there is a point where it is too big. Therefore, the ability to be mutually accountable, to completely understand what everybody else is up to, how they're involved, what they're doing, starts to become harder and harder and harder. It becomes a lot harder to actually have that mutual accountability when you've got incredibly large numbers. Some organizations will have teams numbering 50 or more, however, they are usually broken into smaller units or sub teams. And part of the reason for that is it's difficult to communicate really effectively, and we understand the absolute importance of communication in teams, and especially if you're going to hold each other mutually accountable for each other's actions, you need to have very effective communication. Very difficult when you've got very, very large numbers. So an effective team would probably be around that average of 10 people, I guess you could say. 5 people is fine. As little as two is okay. But really, once you're getting over about 20, you should probably look at actually breaking it down into smaller subsections. Now, interesting, I guess what I might actually do is pull up, I've got a picture here that talks about The difference between groups and team. So I'm just going to pull this up, see if you can see it. So the word group, it's actually got quite a broad meaning. A group of passengers on a flight might have a common characteristic, and that might be that they are all traveling to the same destination. They're not necessarily working towards a common cause, though. So a groups do not even need to refer to people, actually. For example, a group of products in a supermarket, in this case, the word group is actually quite arbitrary. It's actually quite irrelevant. A team, however, though, is generally more specific. We would not refer to an airline, our airline passengers as a team, unless, however, they crashed on a desert island and therefore needed to work together to survive, in which case they would probably become a team at that point. The distinction is that the team are working together for a common cause, and as mentioned, the real distinction is the underlying mutual accountability. So let's have a look at a couple of different words and the differences between groups and teams. I've got the word on my screen here of ownership. So this is one that I like to sort of refer to. So in a group, members tend to be focused on themselves. They're not sufficiently involved actually in the planning or the objectives. In a team, typically, members feel a sense of ownership for their job because they are actually committed to the values. They're actually part of the broader sense of creation. In creativity, as such, here is mentioned that members are told, usually in a group situation, members are told what to do rather than being asked what the best approach might be. And in a team, as far as creativity and contribution is concerned, members contribute to the organization's success by applying their unique talents, knowledge, and creativity to team objectives. Trust, the word trust, in a group, members distrust the motives of colleagues because they don't understand the roles of other members. Now, in a team environment, members work in a climate of trust and are encouraged to openly express their ideas, opinions, disagreements, feelings, questions are welcomed. As far as decision making goes, in a group situation, members tend to work in an unstructured environment with undetermined standards of performance. In a team environment, members tend to work in a structured environment. They know what boundaries exist and who has the final authority. We can keep talking, I guess, about the differences between groups and teams to sort of understand that, but I guess I've had my own sort of experience with this too. I actually I've worked in sales before. I've come from sales backgrounds, and I've worked in sales teams before. We had a team leader. There was a group of, I think, 7 or 8 of us in the team, and we all had to make sales for the day, and we all had our own targets. Now, they referred to us as a team, but in reflection, we actually weren't a team. In reflection, all we were was a working group. We had a common purpose, so we were doing the same role in the business. We needed to generate sales for the business. We all met at the same time. We sat in the same area. We had the same leader or team leader in our group. But in actuality, we weren't a team. We were actually a working group. And the reason was there wasn't any what we referred to earlier as mutual accountability. And so what we mean by that is if I'm having a poor day as a salesman, it doesn't affect anybody else. If I'm having a bad day, it doesn't affect anybody else. And therefore, none of the other members of the group, which I'll now call it a group, felt the need to be accountable for my actions because it didn't affect them. He's having a bad day. He's not getting any sales today. Okay, no problems. Now, interestingly enough, in that business, there was several different sales teams doing different things. They actually took one of the groups, sales teams, I keep saying sales teams, they took one of the sales groups and they actually converted them into a team. And the way they actually did that is they said, okay, so there's 10 of you guys in this group, or they called them a team, there's 10 of you guys in this team. Each day you're all required to sell 10 products. Now, if we multiply that out, as a group, what we're trying to achieve is 100. That's the team target. the end of the day, that's what we're trying to achieve. We want 100 products sold from you 10 staff each day. That's our goal. That's our target. That's what we're aiming for. Instead of breaking down the actual goals for the individuals by saying, okay, Adam, you've got to sell 10. Sue, you've got to sell 10. John, Peter, Sally, 10, 10, and 10. What they said was this. They said, okay, you're a team now, and we now know a team needs to be mutually accountable for each other. We've already discovered that. So what they actually did was they said, okay, Sue, Adam, you no longer have to sell 10. You all have to sell 100 as a group. So no longer will you be marked or judged based on your individual performance. You will now all be judged together on your team performance. Now, interestingly enough, what happened was the actual sales in this group, this team, no longer a group, it became a team, improved. They improved probably by about 10 to 20% in an incredibly short period of time as well. And the reason for that is that mutual accountability. So what happens in this situation is if I'm having a bad day, if I'm noticeably upset, if my sales aren't going so well, things are happening because we're accountable for each other, because my part is important in this group. We are in this team. In this team, we need to sell 100 products because my role is incredibly important. You are no longer going to sit there and let me have a bad day. You're going to pull me up, you're going to have a chat, you're going to work out what's going on, you're going to re-inspire me, re-motivate me, we're going to talk it through, things are going to be out on the open, we're going to get through this together. Do you see how that works? So teams are quite an exciting thing. So, typically when we talk about sales teams, they're actually working groups because they usually have individual targets. However, a football team actually is a team. So a football team is a team. And why do you think a football team is a team as opposed to a sales team that have individual targets? What makes a football team a team, knowing now what we know about teams?
Well, it's that mutual accountability, isn't it? At the end of the day, the team has to win, Um,
Absolute.
although you still have the individuals in the groups, but it's the team of, the team of Collingwood or Carlton that people actually identify with. And it's the team that is placed on the leaderboard rather than, the secondary component, which is the individual score.
True.
So
But
it's
what a
interesting definition you gave us.
yeah, thank you, thank you. And look, I mean, and you're 100% correct. And the reality is, if I kick a point, or if I had a shot on goal and I missed, it doesn't just affect me. As you said, the scoreboard doesn't have my name on it. It actually has the whole team's name on it. It affects the whole
Yeah.
team. So therefore, and that's why we often have a coach in a team, because you want somebody to help galvanize everybody together, have that common, I guess, understanding of what we're trying to achieve together. And so the power of putting people together to operate and to work towards a common goal is actually quite powerful. And I was actually amazed when I saw this happen in that working environment. I saw this team that went from a team of individuals, and it was very cliquey as well. And what I mean by cliquey is there was a couple of girls and they were friends with each other, and then there was a couple of guys, and one of the guys was friends with the girls, but the other guys weren't friends with the girls, and it was even in such a small group or team, it was very, very cliquey, incredibly cliquey. Everybody had their own agenda, because at the end of the day, if you're having a bad day, you know what, you're just a bad-mooded person, I don't really care about you, go away. I'm over here, I'm trying to make some sales.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in what's going on with you. But as soon as that dynamic shift happened and changed, where they became a team, so instead of the 10 of them selling 10 products each, the 10 of them had to sell 100 as a group. As soon as that started happening, the clickiness actually started going away. It was really an interesting thing to kind of watch on and see because and coming back to those two words again, that mutual accountability. If I'm going to get my bonus at the end of the month, I need you. I really need you. I really, really need you. And it forces us to work together. And the reality is when you get
Together. Yeah.
absolutely. And the reality is when you get people working strongly together and pushing in the same direction and willing to look after each other and help each other, the reality is the sum of the what's that saying? The sum of all parts is greater than the individual. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's actually a better result. So you can actually achieve more by
Yep.
by doing that. Some of the, I guess, some other benefits of a team: creativity and contribution.
Hmm.
In a group, members tend to be told what to do rather than being asked what to sort of do. So a team typically will encourage a lot more cooperation and creativity. Um, yeah, also in a group, members tend to be a lot more cautious about what they say. They're really a lot more wary about offending somebody or saying something, or they're not likely to speak up to say something, fear of might offending somebody, and so on and so forth. Interestingly enough, in a team, that stuff is just thrown out. It's thrown out straight away because of that mutual account. Because I need you, I can't afford not to express what needs to be expressed. I'm more willing to air conflict. I'm more willing to show, my true colors, to try and work together to fix issues together because we need each other. Um, yeah, in a group, members tend to work um, in an unstructured environment, a lot of undetermined standards and so forth. A good leader will always set the standards and set the performance expectations, and therefore the team knows exactly where they're heading as a group. There's absolutely no ambiguity with regards to that. Sue, I guess we could sort of just sort of share it around a bit. What sort of experiences have you had in working with teams? What have you seen that seems to have worked really well? How would you sort of understand, I guess, the meaning of a team, or I guess what makes the team? Okay, so I think we've had some audio issues there, but Sue, I was just asking, did you want to join in the conversation? Have you had any experience in working with teams? What have you seen that's worked really well or hasn't really worked well in teams? How would you sort of, how do you understand and define teams yourself?
I really like your definition. There's been times where, I mean, we've all worked in groups that have worked and groups that haven't worked. Generally, the groups that haven't worked, I'm the one who's beat my head up against a brick wall, or it feels like that.
Yep.
Um, but I really like the definition. So it kind of splits then my recollections and some of the teams I've worked in, I suppose. Um, as a manager looking after what I'd call a dysfunctional team, or people who are, on their own path looking after their own stuff, it's really quite
Yeah.
difficult to get everyone on board sometimes.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
What?
I mean, we all know what feels good and when it works, and we all know when it doesn't work.
Yeah,
The
true.
challenge is getting everyone on board. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Why do you mentioned that you've got a team that was dysfunctional? You've actually mentioned a few teams. You had one that you were managing that was dysfunctional. You've had teams that you've been in before that weren't gelling so well. Are you able to reflect on one of those examples? Maybe not the one that you were managing, but maybe the one that you were involved in. So just as being a team member and involved in a team that you sort of saw or felt wasn't sort of gelling well, wasn't sort of working so well. Um,
Yeah.
how would you reflect on that? Yeah, what do you remember from that?
Um, just the feeling of politics, feeling of unsafety, not being safe in terms of opening your mouth,
Mm,
and everyone just not working towards the same. ending, if that makes sense. So everyone
Yep.
had, it was a cross-functional team, different divisions, but not everyone working towards the same objective or wanting to get the one-upmanship almost, really, which didn't help the business in the long run, unfortunately. And people leave. So,
I think, having different sets of goals is a big way to have everybody operate or pushing in a different direction. So I think having a shared common goal is an incredibly important part of getting a little bit of unity, of getting people pushing in the same direction. But it's interesting that you say that, you never ever
yeah,
felt comfortable in opening your mouth, and actually that is a symptom of a dysfunctional team.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
essentially fear of conflict. It's one of the dysfunctions that we discussed actually in our last assessment task. So um, team members, when there is that fear of conflict, team members opt generally to say nothing. And in fact, quite often what happens is that you get a lot of gossip that happens behind closed doors that starts brooding, and it gets a bit out of control, actually. So
yeah,
it's quite difficult. It actually requires a good leader in the
yeah,
team to, I guess, to sort of be able to be there to hear people out, to listen to people's frustrations, to be able to talk through issues openly, to be comfortable to air some of those conflicts, to discuss things as a group, and to enable people to understand how they fit in. So the next question we've actually got to explore here is, what strategies could you use to help your team understand their purpose? And the third question is, sorry, I highlighted the wrong one. Third question is, describe policies or procedures that you could implement to help teams to take responsibility for their own work. So let's sort of look at those, I guess, uh, together. The first thing I would say is, so the question is, how can you help people to understand their roles or the responsibilities? Um, there's some information in the materials there that refers to this. Then, but what I want to say is that when somebody understands how they fit in, it makes a big difference. So if I understand that what I'm doing in the business is an incredibly important part of the overall overarching scheme, or what's happening in the overarching scheme, if I know how my part fits in, it's going to make me more motivated to be excited about what I do, to understand what I do, and all of those sorts of things. So it's really, really clear that you, as a leader or as a team leader, ensure that you let your team know that what they're doing, how their role fits in with the grand purpose, the grand scheme of things in the business. So if people feel like they're just doing a job and they're not really sure where it all fits in, or they can't really determine how important that role is or how that sort of fits in, it's going to be hard for them to maintain, that their sort of motivation towards it, and so on and so forth. So regardless of an individual's position, they need to have a clear understanding of what their role is. The main personnel directly involved in that sort of thing is, team members, HR, managers, so on and so forth. There are a number of ways that we can assist in letting people know what their roles are. Some of the obvious ones are, job descriptions. So when you start a job or when you enter a new role, one of the first things that you'll probably see is a job description. Typically, when you're looking for work, you'll see descriptions of jobs or job descriptions when there are positions being advertised. But these job descriptions are one way that we can help people to understand what their role is. KPIs. So a KPI is a key performance indicator. We'll be exploring this a little bit later as well through the course. But letting people know what's actually expected of them through setting KPIs, it gives people a clear knowledge of being able to answer the question, how will I know if I've achieved? How will I know if I've done a good job? Your staff members need to know, your team members need to be able to answer that question very, very cleanly and clearly. So you need to be able to set KPIs, and a KPI could be for the sales team, it could be sell 100 products per day. That's their KPI. So as a team, how will I know if I've achieved? All we have to do is work out how many items have we sold today. Beautiful, we've achieved. Also, what other ways would you suggest to assist team members to understand their purpose, or um, what's out there that we can, what's out there, I guess, policies, procedures, or what things can we do to help team members take responsibility for their work as well? We're looking at the second part of that question. And so you're welcome to jump in on any of this if you like at any point, because you're joining me in the session today. I think when it comes to
Yep.
helping team members take responsibility for their own work, for me, it's a matter of really including them throughout the whole process. So if I want somebody to take responsibility um, for what they're doing, I would actually involve them in the, I guess, the decision-making process. I would involve them in the planning stage of a given project. I would involve them in setting individual performance plans, KPIs, those sorts of things. If I can involve somebody, they're more likely to take that ownership on their work. We talked about the word ownership a bit earlier. They'll take a little bit more ownership, and therefore, they'll be more responsible. You've got standard operating procedures, you've got policies that can be distributed within an organisation. The policies, these procedures, things like codes of conduct as well, distributing these hard copy things or electronic policies and procedures can also assist in having team members understand how they're expected to behave, but also how what's actually expected of them in terms of a performance. So would you like to add anything to those couple of questions that we've just gone through?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've sat in meetings where teams have been informed of, the strategic plan from a senior level and then match that down in terms of what that means for the division and then matching that down to what that means for individual teams or, individuals in the team basically.
That's great.
So that's worked, where the communication's been clear. I've also, I suppose, in the last 12 months seen it in a couple of call centres where they've had, their targets have been up on the board for the day or the week or the month, and then everyone's contribution has been tracked through that process. So I've seen it happen a couple of different ways. Certainly, having the team goals up there in everyone's face has been a good thing. Even at a restaurant I went to where we were working and doing some support work for the restaurant, they had their sales targets up on a board on top of the fridge in the back room.
Yeah.
And everyone was, everyone could see it, and there was a bonus at the end of the week or the end of the month for the top performer. So having that clarity just makes it easy to know what you're supposed to be doing and where you're fitting, basically. I think it's really cool if that communication is really clear.
So you've actually talked about a couple of creative ways to have some of those goals and those standards. Sometimes we talk about, customer service standards. So, all customers need to be served within a minute. If in hospitality, you can never leave a dirty plate on the table for more than a minute or whatever this customer service standard is. Sometimes having those standards, as you say, like up on a whiteboard or a poster somewhere around the office, always other good ways of sort of communicating the message and getting people to sort of understand their role. But I really like what you said at the start where you talked about how, you'll take the direction of the business or the strategic goals of the business and it's broken down into the team goals and then the individual goals. So as an individual, I know how our team fits in, but I know what my role in my team, which therefore understanding what my role in the overall business is. And I think that is quite an incredible thing. I mean, it's actually, there is elements of human motivation and human psychology that relate to this without being an expert in this area, but human motivation can be increased when an individual feels like that what they're doing is for a greater cause. So when you as a human being feel like what you're doing is leading towards a much, much, much bigger something, whether you're acting on in ethics or whatever you're doing, if you understand that it has a much greater meaning than than just what you're doing, it's a lot easier to maintain that motivation. Let's have a look at the next one.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some of these questions just are sort of a little bit, you know, um, it's kind of a bit random, I guess, the order of these questions and so on and so forth. So we might be jumping to and fro a little bit, but we're sort of using these questions to guide it just so that you guys can, easily access the information that you need to access to complete these activities. So this question is actually asking, describe three qualities that you might observe in an effective leader. So you know what? I always like, we could talk about all of the great qualities. What about let's answer this from the reverse view. So Sue, I'll ask. I always love looking at it from the reverse angle. So that team that you're involved in that you said wasn't working so well. If you can reflect on the leader
Yep.
or whoever was, I guess, the manager or the team leader at the time, tell
Mm.
me some of the things that you think that they weren't doing so well. So instead of telling me what instead of, okay, so this question is getting students to talk about qualities of an effective leader. Let's discuss the ineffective leadership stuff. So, yeah, have you got any good examples?
Being political within the team, not being clear and consistent, um, not standing up and giving a direction, basically. Um,
Wow, yeah, yeah.
and then not pulling, I think the worst thing was not pulling people into line when they stepped over the line. And, if
Massive.
yeah, there was some heated discussions and, there's a way of speaking to people that wasn't terribly nice. And that was given to be the standard within the office actually. Well, was pretty much a bullying environment in the end.
Oof,
So it wasn't nice at all.
that's not
Yeah,
good.
and unfortunately, it could have been stopped pretty quickly, but it was allowed to fester and get worse, which, didn't end up in anyone's interest in the long run. But anyway,
You talked about
things
there,
happen, unfortunately.
yeah, Sue, you've actually raised some unbelievably great points here. This is exactly what the whole subject's about, really. You talked about not pulling people into line, and we also refer to
Yep.
that, effectively as, not managing poor performance. So if there's somebody that's performing badly and we do nothing about it, it's a big problem. It is a big, big, big problem. This whole course is about leadership, and so, you know, if you're going to be an effective leader, you need to be able to manage poor performance as well. So if you've got a group of people,
Mhm.
10 people, and these 10 guys are trying to sell, 100 products a day as a team, and one of the members of the team, they take twice as long for lunch and they're very informal with their approach. They don't stick to the script that everybody's meant to stick to. They
Mhm.
but maybe they do maybe they even talk to customers really poorly. They might even use foul language on the phone. They may even engage in bullying or some of these things that you've just referred to yourself. If I, as the leader, don't do anything about that, what sort of message does that send to the rest of my team? Can you imagine
Oh, that
yourself?
that's the behaviour that's acceptable. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
have. I was in it.
I mean, why would I
Yep.
why would I want to toe the company line and work really hard if I'm looking next to me and the guy next to me is just, you know, he hasn't even followed any of the instructions that we as a team have agreed on and are committed to. And I feel like this
Mhm.
is this is bothering me now because I want to get my goal, which is to hit the 100 product sales today, and I can't achieve that because this guy over here's or gal over here isn't pulling their weight. And the worst part is the leader isn't saying anything about it. So there's been no
Mm.
pulling into line, as it were, as you mentioned. And now I'm losing my
Mhm.
motivation to continue and to do the right things. So by not pulling people into line will have an
Yep.
absolute adverse effect on everybody else in the team. No direction is another one that you mentioned there, so
Mhm.
fantastic. Not having any direction
Yeah.
is like ground zero for teams. A good team will have a common purpose and a common goal that they can hold each other mutually accountable for. With no direction, there's no direction. Uh, it's a big problem. You've got to have direction. Um, you also mentioned not being clear and consistent. you know,
Mhm.
the old do as I say, not as I do sort of scenario, or those sorts of things. A good leader needs to be a good role model. A good
Mhm.
leader also needs to be able to, um, yeah, well, actually, really just be a good role model. I mean, if you're going to sort of expect that of those around you, you need to lead the way and show how to actually do that. So a couple of things, what are some, okay, let's flip this on its head again. So maybe what are some good, so it's three qualities that you might observe in an effective team leader. I'll give you one. So how about ongoing informal feedback?
Yep.
A good team leader
Highly necessary.
always provide it. And we just differentiate the word formal and informal, because formal is when we sit down once every 6 months, we have a meeting, it's all prepared, it's all organized. Informal is when I walk over to your desk and go, doing a great job. That's informal because it's a non-conceived, non-premeditated situation that's happened. And the good thing about informal
Mhm.
feedback is that it provides immediacy. It happens right now. Um, the worst is when there's something somebody might need to be pulled into line. It may not be a big deal. It might be, hey John, I just heard when you ran through that script, third line, you just missed one of the words, second word from the bottom. Oh yeah, I did too. No worries, mate. Not a big deal. Okay, cool. Keep going. And that bit of feedback has now been passed on in an informal way. And it's really easy to take that information, a little bit of that criticism, if you like, informal. It's actually a lot harder to deliver that in a formal setting. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if that particular example where that guy might have minced one of his words on the script by mistake, could have been completely by mistake, nobody's fault, okay? And I try and give that feedback in a formal situation. So I say, okay, I send him an email and say, I need you to come to a meeting tomorrow morning to discuss the way that you're handling yourself on the phone. Now, all evening, this particular poor
Mhm.
sales guy is going to be thinking about, what did I do? What have I done? What's all this about? And by the time it comes to having that formal meeting with them, they are incredibly defensive. They're ready to be attacked. They feel like it's a personal attack on them. So the importance of informal feedback is unbelievable. Don't just leave the feedback, especially the bad feedback, for formal situations, because it comes with a whole lot more weight at that time. So anyway, there's one. What about one from you, sir? What do you reckon? A quality that you might observe, or a good quality that you might observe in an effective team leader? What have you got?
Um, just I agree with everything you said, basically. Just the communication, I think, is the most important thing for me. And consistency.
Consistency. Yeah, consistency is a really good one. A really good one. Um,
Yep.
Interestingly enough, another thing to sort of keep in check is that you always want to reinforce excellence. There's nothing worse than being on a team that's performing, it's dynamic, it's open, people are accountable for each other, there's hot discussions, people are showing respect for each other, there's care, there's a bit of conflict that's aired, it's dealt with, it's moved on. We're achieving, we are really performing as a team at this point, and the leader never reinforces that good behavior. Never do you hear you've done a good job. Never is there any shared wins, all of those sorts of things. So, this is also an important part. Eventually, we're all human beings. Eventually, if I don't feel like my contributions have been acknowledged, then my own motivation is going to wane a little bit. So, uh, a good leader will also, remain or continue to reinforce that excellence and that information. So, you know, be sincere when you say thank you, or when you tell somebody that they've done a great job. Be sincere about it. Public recognition is a great one. So, stand up in front of the team and say, here are the things that, have a team meeting once a week. Stand up in front of your team and let everybody know, here are the things that we have achieved. Well done this one. Well done this one. Everybody, let's bit of a round of applause for A, B, and C. They've done a fantastic job with this, that, and the other. Get it out there. Let people feel like they're really acknowledged and they've done a great job, because they're likely to do that again. And also, use some listening skills. A good leader or a good team leader will yeah, we'll demonstrate some good listening skills too. Just with the last question there, we talked about this in the last session when we talked about the lack of accountability. It was actually one of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Actually, it was the 4th one. It's the avoidance of accountability. So once the team's accountabilities are expressed and communicated via performance plans, you've got to have clear consequences if they're not delivered or desired on performance level. So we talked about, what happens if you don't pull people into line or manage poor performance, and that's effectively what we're talking about there. So go back and have a look at the materials to assist you with that last question as far as some strategies, but we've sort of touched on it a bit in any case. So have a look at the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's something that you would have already answered, no doubt, through your assessment in the last subject. So that ends today's session. Next week, or the resource support session number 2, we're going to be looking at the next 2 activities: develop and facilitate team cohesion and facilitate teamwork. Thank you very much for your attendance. Sue, I see you've just dropped off, but thank you so much for joining in the chat. Had a great session with you today. Much appreciated. Thanks for joining in, and thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you in the next session. Cheers.